John Scott here with Jonathan Acosta. Bills moving on to week 2 against the Jets on Sunday afternoon, 1 o'clock. So thankfully we won't be still working at 1 a.m. after this one, God willing here. Although you
or like
are
3
anchoring.
4 a.m.
You are anchoring after Sunday Night Football. You may actually still be working at 1 a.m. But as the Bills turn their page to week 2, they still are reflecting a bit on week 1. It was not up to the standard for this team to allow 40 points, the magnitude of yards, and outside of back end of the fourth quarter, it was pretty much Baltimore doing whatever they could offensively in particular here. So Sean McDermott really hammering home the fact that, hey, this is going to be an intense, difficult week of practice for his guys, even though they're still coming out of a very physical game sore.
You say hammer home the point. He said that it needed to be a difficult week of practice in a different way about 3 or 4 times in that press conference. And you don't normally see Sean McDermott hammer home one specific theme that often in one press conference. So I think that it was something that he not only made clear to us, but I think it's a message that he was certainly making sure to deliver to his coaching staff and his players throughout this week, starting today as well. And it makes a lot of sense because the other thing he said is it's early on in the season. There's a lot to improve upon. This is a team that has, let's be honest about it, Super Bowl aspirations, right? And they're not going to get anywhere close to that with defensive performances like the one we saw Sunday night. So I think Sean McDermott is making sure to sort of nip in the bud, or at least try to, the defensive issues that led to the Ravens' performance in week 1 and try to get those corrected before taking on a Jets team that, while it's not Lamar Jackson and Derrick Henry, Justin Fields and Breece Hall did look pretty good together against the Steelers last week.
Ed Oliver saying, hey, we played a really tough and physical game, a lot of snaps in that one. The bodies are still sore. So to go full pads Wednesday off of a game like that is unusual at this point in the season. And Sean McDermott acknowledging that, but saying, hey, you got to power through. And I think that's the message being sent here. I don't care necessarily how you feel. They're not going to put them in harm's way, but hey, you're going to have to mentally get past some things to really sharpen things because, as you said, Baltimore's probably the best team they'll face all season, and you get it out of the way week 1. But even still, playing that caliber of defense in particular, even lesser quality teams will give them issues.
Well, and we saw Justin Fields and that Jets offense put up 32 points last week. So again, no slouch, it's just week 1. So you're kind of walking that fine line of, okay, how do we not make too much out of week 1, but also evaluating it the way it needs to be evaluated and taking out of that the way it needs to be, what needs to be taken out of. You do that both with what you see on film from the Jets, with looking back and what you learned from that Ravens game. Sean McDermott also made the point about how they're going to be sore a little bit, stuff like that, especially playing against that Ravens offense, and that you hope that as the season goes on, they just sort of become maybe a little bit more immune to that soreness. So I think that goes to your point of, hey, they're really making sure to sort of drain a lot of energy from them, make sure that they go at a high tempo this week in practice to try to sort of callous them and prepare them for what this season is going to be.
It's like the first week back in the gym, you get a couple good lifts in.
Yeah,
the next couple
sore.
days,
Yeah.
you can barely move your body out there like that. We saw Tre'Davious White returning to the practice field, missing the past couple weeks, dealing with a groin injury, officially listed as limited here. Sean McDermott saying we're still going to continue to take this one day at a time with him, but encouraging to see White back out there, even in a limited capacity, and pushing him closer to potentially starting again on Sunday.
And we saw him out there not just practicing, but practicing without the red non-contact jersey. So I think that's a good sign because a lot of times you'll see a player just coming back from injury, just wear that jersey as a sort of added layer of protection for a player coming back from an injury, especially after missing a game. So I think it's a good sign. And I think from reading the tea leaves, from hearing Sean McDermott talk, because Dorian Strong got the start this past week against Baltimore, but it sounds to me that if Tre'Davious White is healthy and in a good spot, because he's a veteran and has the knowledge of this defense, there's maybe not the acclimation period that he needs to it the way maybe a rookie or a second-year player would need. So I think if Tre'Davious White is healthy and in a good spot come Friday, come Saturday morning, we could see him start week 2 against the Jets.
Not great urgency, though, to feel like, hey, we got to get this guy because the replacement wasn't very good. Dorian Strong more than held his own. Bobby Babbage saying a few days ago he felt the rookie didn't blink at all. We spoke with him after practice today, and he said, hey, I didn't feel out of place. Yeah, there were some nerves, but he was able to mentally prepare himself because he knew ahead of time that he was going to be a starter. I asked him in particular about that early holding call because a young player on that stage in that type of a moment, it easily could almost put you on tilt. And the way Strong responded to my question, it sounded like it almost went the other direction for him.
Yeah, it just seemed to sort of motivate him, and sort of he talked about how he's a physical corner. And so I think even just having that call, and maybe to your question where that can maybe derail a young player's game, he sort of just seemed to embrace the physicality of the game going up against a team like the Ravens. I asked him what he learned from that game, especially going up against guys like Lamar and Derrick Henry. He's like, yeah, they're big players, but at the end of the day, you just see that they're men just like we are, and you got to go out and do your job. And to that point, he said, he was asked what his favorite part of that game was. He said tackling Derrick Henry. He was in chase down mode where he tackled him along the sideline in one of the big runs that didn't result in a touchdown for Derrick Henry. And he said he was aware of, you know, the stiff arm and the cutback, and when you rewatch that play, he does a good job of sort of batting down that arm and going in to make the tackle. So I think that speaks to the preparation and where his mentals were going into that game, and the level of focus that he had going into his NFL debut.
I'd have a lot more courage chasing down Derrick Henry for a tackle rather than facing him head on here, where we saw guys like Cole Bishop, Josh Norman years ago. Plenty of guys on the wrong side of the highlight reel, but still a great play by Dorian Strong here. Interesting, the Bills are going to go back-to-back weeks, certainly not the same caliber of players, but the Lamar Jackson, Derrick Henry 1-2 punch of mobile quarterback and great running back. Like Justin Fields and Breece Hall are not those caliber of players, but still an effective duo a week ago, and two players that have shown to be really effective throughout their careers. The Bills now have another crack at maybe righting some of the wrongs from this past game.
Well, and I think that's where the benefit of starting against a team like the Ravens in week one is, because you can have all of the film you want to review from practice, from training camp, from the preseason. It's not the same as once you get going for the real thing. So it's, you know how like sometimes they have like those players that they put on scout team, and it's like, okay, simulate this kind of guy. Maybe you would have a Justin Fields try to simulate Lamar Jackson, but you got the real thing. You got the upper echelon of what that type of quarterback is going to be. So there's no better practice for this Bills team for going up against a mobile quarterback than going up against a guy who's won 2 MVPs. So I think they're going to be in a good spot for that, especially for the rookies, for the TJ Sanders, for the Deion Walker, to get to see that up close and in person. Being able to review that film this week with the coaches is about as good of a learning lesson as they're going to have.
Josh Allen winning the AFC Offensive Player of the Week for the 16th time in his career, most of any player in the entire league since Allen entered in 2018. No surprise there. We all saw what he did, especially in the fourth quarter. But now we move ahead to a Jets defense that, as great as Allen has been ascending into an MVP, they've done maybe a better job than any other team in the league at minimizing the effectiveness of this offense led by Allen.
And the game that comes to me to mind is the very first game I covered here in Buffalo. Was the season opener 2 seasons ago in New York, Monday Night Football. Allen has the 3 picks, which really played a huge part in the Bills losing that game eventually in overtime. A little bit better of a performance last year in New York on Monday night, but still not for a Bills offense that averaged over 30 points per game. It was not a vintage Bills offense performance. They sort of had to eke out that win 23-20 last year in New York. So yes, a different coaching staff with the Jets right now, but Aaron Glenn, we saw the defenses that he was able to put on the field in Detroit. They still have a lot of those same pieces on that New York Jets defense, namely Sauce Gardner at cornerback. So you expect for this Jets defense to maybe not keel over and allow 35, 40 points to this Bills offense. You expect it to be another team, another defense that's going to give them a run for their money. And it's these division games. A lot of these divisional games play out. We saw it last year against the Patriots, right? Where you maybe on paper, the Bills playing a team of the caliber of the Jets or the Patriots should be a 14-point, 17-point favorite maybe. But the way the games play out, you see it not just in the AFC East, but across every NFL division. They end up being tight, close games. So it'll be fascinating to see how Allen carries over this incredible performance against the Ravens to see if he can replicate that in any sort of way against the Jets.
He was asked, Allen, about Ed Oliver's performance, and he really emphasized that in general, the biggest issue for quarterbacks is pressure up the middle from the interior of a defensive line. Quinnen Williams is still awesome. He was awesome against the Steelers, and that certainly poses an issue that Allen could once again be dealing with pressure right in his face, that he's not able to step up into the pocket. So just something to watch. Also, a week ago, Sauce Gardner, for the first time in his career, shadowing the opposing team's best wide receiver. held DK Metcalf to 1 catch for 11 yards. It'll be curious, do they carry that over to face the Bills? And if so,
who do they shadow?
After Keon Coleman's performance, would you go that route, or do they maybe just play both sides of the field?
Or could he even shadow a Josh Palmer, right? Because Josh Palmer is a guy who's a veteran in this league now, and we saw some good things out of him. I think this Bills passing offense is obviously the thing that you feel most comfortable with coming out of that game against the Ravens. Obviously, we know that the Bills are able to run the ball on the ground, but the way they got behind and were still able to attack that Ravens secondary. And again, I think the big takeaway is the play of Keon Coleman, and even something that Sean McDermott today spoke upon on how, hey, he wasn't really being fed targets necessarily in the first half, but he continued to compete. The ball eventually found him, and he became that go-to guy in the fourth quarter. I think that sort of performance for a guy like Keon gives him a lot of confidence going forward. And now we wouldn't be surprised, I don't think, to see him come out against the Jets, and especially if he's not being shadowed by Sauce Gardner. Let's say Gardner's on Josh Palmer, and they maybe want to have a different guy on Coleman, or maybe throw 2 guys at him every once in a while. I think he's a guy that we sort of expect to maybe not replicate that sort of performance, but sort of build upon that and sort of be another one of Josh's go-to guys against New York.
I'll just say James Cook popping up on the Bills injury report on Sunday, limited with a hamstring injury. That's something we'll monitor throughout the week. Bills at the Jets Sunday, 1 o'clock in the Meadowlands. With Jonathan Acosta, I'm John Scott for Channel 2 Sports.